when I told my dad, like, I'm dating someone from Norway, and he made a joke, he's like, damn, you couldn't even have gone for, like, an Italian or somewhere south. You went for the most northern, like,
the whitest of the white.
Amber and I have been dating for going on 2 years now.
We have been together for 5 years, married for just coming up on 3.
We've been together, I want to say 5 months.
When I met Amber, she identified as straight and had a history of dating men, so we were just gonna be buds.
Let's go skating together.
Buds who go skating together. And we went skating, and I remember this moment where she was off the ice lacing up her boot, and she looked up at me and smiled. And I was like, I have to make her love me.
We met in class in college at USC. We have a little bit of differing opinions about who kind of was flirting with who first.
I was randomly talking about movies one day, and this strange girl from across the room started screaming about that she had seen this movie and wanted to get into the conversation.
I was doing improv and you were doing stand-up. You did a set with your backpack on and had braces at the time. And in my mind, I noticed the braces first and I thought, he's cute, but it's unfortunate he has braces because
Jesus
that's a
Christ.
deal breaker.
I remember, I think a few months after we became official, I asked you if, like, the first time we started talking, you were, like, thinking about the fact that I was black. And you said, no, not really. It didn't really, pass.
Like, I wasn't thinking of race really until sort of our family met. I think that was the first time, you know, my mom was like, where is Sheridan from? And it was like, no, she's from New Jersey. It's like, no, where is she from? And I was like, let's not do this. This is not a good topic at all.
I was very cognizant of your race when we first started talking because I have long been, I don't know if accused is the right word, but people have strongly suggested that I lean a certain way with the people that I date.
Which way?
We don't have to get into it. And I was just like, no, she's a Latina. But
You're on really tenuous ground with that.
I think that you're always aware when you start dating somebody new of what you have in common and what you don't have in common.
It is interesting, like the thing that popped up when she came to Norway to visit my friends and family, like all the conversations went from like, how's it going over there? How's the US? How's work? How's school? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, to like, all right, let's talk about racism, let's talk about segregation. Everything turned to like that.
I was apparently the outlet they needed. They needed a catalyst to bring up the discussions, and that was my function.
It was not something I thought about before I started dating you, I thought, because I have dated different races. And I feel like it had never been a topic of discussion, really. When we started dating, I guess I did feel a little bit of the heat you feel sometimes.
You know, we live in LA, and I don't think that people feel like it's something they've never seen before, obviously. But I do feel sometimes from men, I get the vibe like, she's with this white woman when she could be with me.
It's further complicated by the gender and sexuality of it, because it is, generally that's like the first set of reactions that we clock. I think Amber summed it up pretty great last week when she said that we'll often walk into a space, and I can see it happening now that she's mentioned it, that people will look and go like, what? Oh, okay.
people don't notice it, and then sometimes when they do notice it, they come on a little too strong.
Like how?
Like that one time when we were at the train stop last weekend, and that guy was on his bicycle.
He saw me, he saw you, he kept biking. He looked back while he was biking forward, kept biking, looked back again, and then went.
And then biked away.
I have heard horror stories about interracial couples and, like, you know, families not being okay with it, not getting along. I am fine with a few jokes here and there about how white he is. I'm fine with, you know, I had twists a couple months ago and I went to Norway and they were fascinated and all up in my hair. That is fine to me because I know it could be so much worse.
Some people don't like it, and some people spend a lot of time staring, and I mean, seeing Amber first and seeing that Amber's beautiful and like wanting to say something to her or, you know, look at her, and then seeing me and then registering the disappointment, and you can say that that's wrapped up it's true, wrapped up in both sexual identity, race identity, and gender identity.
Educating, especially my family, is a little tricky because it's a weird subject because they don't necessarily understand that it's sensitive. The first time Sheridan met my grandfather, he used an old-fashioned version of the N-word, not about her, but about someone else, and it was in Norwegian, so I don't even know if she understood it.
Here's the thing,
But it was
though.
like-
the Norwegian word for Negro, which
Yes.
is a term people use. I feel very uncomfortable when white people even use the term Negro, but whatever. What is the Norwegian word for Negro, Peter?
I don't want to say it.
I can say it. It's Niga, which sounds like a bad word in English. So while he wasn't saying the bad N-word, he was kind of saying the bad N-word.
For sure.
I think you are good at code switching and you inhabit a lot of white spaces very comfortably. I think that is maybe more difficult than you're given credit for.
When did you realize that?
When the reverse happened, when I went to the
It
cookout.
was a barbecue where a majority of the people there were black. I guess you probably saw me in a more relaxed, kind of colloquial.
It was fine, but I was more out of my element.
I have learned that although like we could be in a restaurant or in a customer service situation or something like that, and where I'm very aggressive and generally get what I want. When I'm paying for a meal, I've learned that it's not always a situation that she would like me to draw attention to bad service or something like that. Even when bad service does have casual tones of racism to it, that it's not always important to her to necessarily cause a scene because it feels sometimes that you're playing into stereotypes.
Sometimes when we've gone out and I feel like we got bad service, I felt like I want to tip well because I feel like if I don't, you know, sometimes they're like, oh, that's black people never tip, you know what I mean? And I hate that stereotype and it makes me furious. And we'll be sitting down and she'll be like, but this was truly terrible. Like, nothing came out that we ordered. Like, it was an awful experience, and I still feel like I want to leave a nice tip.
The only time I feel like I truly got upset with Peter, we're very lucky. We don't fight a lot. We're like very in sync in a lot of ways. We didn't have our car registered in California when we should have had it registered. It was still with New Jersey. It's registered now, so don't come after me.
Can't.
I know they can't, but it just in case. Still, I'm a black woman. I worry about these things. We drove around for like 6 months with our car not being registered in California when it should have. When I was driving it, I wouldn't even drive it barely because I was so afraid of getting pulled over. And at the time, my dad was on the deed and I was thinking, oh my God, they're not gonna see that my name is on here. They're gonna think black person stole this car driving around. Meanwhile, Peter fucking drove around, no problems at all, felt great. He was like, if I get pulled over, I get pulled over. And so you start to think like, wow, you know, getting pulled over by the cops isn't the scariest thing in the world to Peter. Meanwhile,
Right.
to me and to so many black people, that could die. And like, it's a very obviously dramatic example, but it happens.
You have dated people of color, but it was in this very protected space in terms of college. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not a gas station. It's not like, you know, a place outside. Like, it's very protected in that space, so you don't really get to see a lot of it. But there were a couple of times in public where a certain situation would happen and you would kind of interpret it very differently than how I'd interpreted it.
Are you thinking about the movie theater?
The trailers weren't even on yet. Like, the movie hadn't even started, and I was like just texting like right before. And this guy like was like, "You gonna turn your phone off, right?"
He was a middle-aged white man.
Yes. Everyone's on their phones, but he specifically singled me out and talked down to me. And you faded away. You faded away completely.
Well, I thought he was talking to me too, because I was also on my phone.
He
so
wasn't
I
talking to you.
very obediently put away my phone.
But you
But
faded away
I should have.
completely.
I should have
But it's I don't.
come
I
to your
just-
defense.
I don't know. I don't need that from you.
But I feel like that's what you did want from that moment.
You know what just came to mind for me is when we were in Kansas together
Right,
and we went to that bowling alley.
right,
And I feel like we've gotten so used to how we are in LA
yes.
and how people react to us in LA. But I feel like when we were in that environment, the reaction was different. It was very much like, what is that?
I felt less safe there.
I felt like I had experienced that kind of aggression being thrown before and was perfectly capable of handling it, but I was worried about her because I was like, I don't know if she's ever experienced this before.
And then at the same time, we were driving around and we passed by a house with a Confederate flag hanging from it.
Yes, I forgot.
And that was a like, is that real? Can people, like, is everybody okay? And this, like, we drove around the neighborhood for a minute, and I think
Just like picking up children, get in the car.
I feel like I never fully expressed my thought on this because we kind of brought it up. But when certain people have called you out for only dating white women, to me that is really deeply unsettling. It's saying you can't date these people. Only white people can date these people.
Do you think a lot about, with my kids, like if they do end up looking more black? My American is so good that no one thinks I'm even an immigrant, so I'm like very much treated exactly like a white man is in the US. And I have no real experience of what it is like to be black in the US. My child will have that experience, and I have no idea, like I can educate myself and feel, I have sympathy and I can listen, but I have like no real life experience in it.
It's weird to think that they won't be going through life like constantly reminded that they're black.
Something that I do worry about is that if my child has fairer skin than me, there will be a suspicion when walking around.
I think you're really amazing, and I just hope that we soon live in a world where we don't ever feel any sort of shade coming our way, you know, ever.
Always look for the person as a person. I mean, I fell in love with Peter
Yeah.
as a human being.
When I fell in love with Sheridan, I just got to know Sheridan.